Nation, and welcome into DawgNation at Large. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation insider Connor Riley, and I have been so excited to show Connor this over the last few days because on Saturday, our good friend Cody Chaffins captured what I thought was the best shot that we got from SEC Media Days, and it had nothing to do with the players on the field. In fact, it had to do with Jesse Palmer and Glenn Schumann. And let me just say, we have all been Glenn Schumann in this case. This is a sped up time lapse. So this goes on for much longer than you would think. Right here, Glenn's engaged. He's talking to Jesse. I'm sure they're talking about the defense and Jesse's getting some notes. But then you'll slowly start to notice that Glenn Schumann's going to take a few steps, try to pull away. Continue to do that. And then Jesse's just going to try to keep talking to him and keep the conversation going. And you can see here still that he's still pretty invested in the conversation, but Glenn's definitely trying to make an exit. And we have all been this person at some point. I mean, this had to go over the span of 15 minutes. There you see it right there. Glenn's trying to get away. Jesse keeps pulling him back in. It was so much fun being able to do this commentary with Jeff.
Yeah, Jesse Palmer's become an interesting figure at Georgia. Obviously, he had the comments critical of Glenn Schumann in the defense earlier this year during the Kentucky game. He was supposed to announce the Georgia-Florida game with Joe Tessitore and was announced as such. But then on the day of the game, it's Jordan Rodgers filling in for Jesse Palmer. And then we see here a long, spirited conversation back and forth between Schumann and Palmer here. Very, very interesting as Jesse Palmer and Glenn Schumann, have had a very interesting intertwined 2025 season.
Yeah, I remember when Jesse Palmer made the comments about how boring the third down defense was, and Brandon Adams tried to make him public enemy number one. And, it's no secret. I am a Jesse Palmer fan. So to have this, to be able to see this, we probably spent too much time on it. But my goodness, in the moment, watching him take a few steps and then Jesse would come right after him. I mean, it was glorious. It was one of my favorite things from last Friday.
Never has Glenn Schumann wanted Kirby Smart to just come up and start yelling his name more than he did in that moment.
All right, so now we move on from Georgia Tech because it is SEC Championship weekend. And of course, the majority of the show is going to revolve around that. So let's just go ahead and get to it on DawgNation at Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
It's kind of crazy how time moves during football season because I feel like it's been a day and also 10 years since we were talking about the SEC championship this time last year, but it kind of feels like maybe it was already written into the script that Georgia and Alabama would play each other in this SEC championship. But today our conversation around the SEC championship is a little different than you might think. We're going to focus on the future of the SEC championship and what that may look like or what it may not look like. Also, we'll do our Dog Bite segment where we'll talk about some of the injuries that we could perhaps see on Saturday, as well as some performances from a group within the Georgia program that I think needed a confidence boost. Also, too, what we're going to do this week, we're going to do an extended version of Meme Machine. We've each got a few to show because I think that Sunday was perhaps one of the best days on college football Twitter ever. There was just so much good content out there. So we're going to do an extended Meme Machine, and then, of course, we will follow it up with our touchdown predictions. And I want to say we're kind of in a dry area with that right now where we really haven't hit on much lately. Now, granted, on Friday, there really wasn't that many guys that scored, so it was kind of tough. But we'll get to that. Maybe somebody will put a point on the board. Connor sent me something earlier this week. And I kind of wanted to base this part of the show around it because it is a topic I feel like has gained a lot of traction and momentum over the span of the last year. So this comes from Ross Dellinger, who I guess he had maybe called earlier on that the SEC championships or conference championships in general would be abolished. But he said, our conference championships on the way out. Most believe it's a matter of when, not if. As the college football playoff expands, conference title games are on the chopping block. Revenue from the games can be replaced by playoff expansion money. And then he also included a story that he had written last December, kind of talking about a similar topic. And I mean, this conversation, we saw it start to take place around this time last year, but it now feels like more people are buying into this idea. I mean, 3 of the Power 4 conference championships are rematches, and some of the runner-ups will be left out. And at this point, it feels like the college football playoff has been built to benefit the teams that are left out of the conference championships instead of those that are participating, which in turn leads us to what we believe is a flawed system.
Yeah, let's take the one game that isn't a rematch this week. That's Indiana, Ohio State. It's the number one team in the country versus the number two team in the country. Two unbeaten teams. I think by just about every metric, they are the best two teams in college football this season. And this is the least amount of juice that a number one versus a number two game has almost ever had. And I think that just sort of speaks to where this sport is at this point in time. And if we want to even hyper in on the SEC this week, there's a world where, like, I'm sure if Alabama wanted to switch places with Oklahoma, there might be a thought to do so, because Alabama is still, I think, squarely on the chopping block this week, where if Georgia is able to beat them by multiple touchdowns, not that we here at DawgNation at Large would ever predict that given the way this series has gone, like, there's a world where Alabama, I think, does in fact end up getting punished because if they lose this weekend. And that only goes to further show the negative impacts of conference championship weekend, where if you're a BYU, yes, it gives you the ability to win your way into the playoff. The same can be said for Virginia. But for the Big Ten and the SEC in particular, the two conferences that soak up the most oxygen in college football, there's just not a lot of reason to play these games right now, other than obviously the money that comes in. But if they expand the college football playoff possibly to 16 teams or 24, like the Big Ten has suggested, you do sort of get a chance to make up some of that money there.
Yeah, and I do feel like maybe people's opinion on this is sort of based upon the conference that they root for or the team that they root for. But when we look at conferences like the Big 12 or the ACC, where both of these games are a rematch, I don't even want to discuss the possibility of Duke winning the ACC, because that would just be the most chaotic outcome. But when you look at the loser of the Big 12 game, which is a rematch, I mean, some team is going to be left out in favor of a team like Notre Dame or Oklahoma, and mostly because they already have secured their spot in the field, but they also didn't have to play that extra game. Now, listen, I am one of those people that I want to see the best teams play in the playoffs, but it's the runner-ups that are hurt the most. And so for conferences like the Big 12 and the ACC, of course, they're going to be the ones to back the idea that let's just take this out so potentially we could have an extra team in there.
Absolutely. Last year with SMU, there was a real wonder of, okay, if SMU loses that game against Clemson in the ACC title game, do they fall out? And it was a very close game, and Clemson wins on a late field goal, and they ultimately end up keeping SMU in the field there. But at the end of the day, and look, Kirby Smart is as big of a proponent as anyone for the SEC championship. This game obviously means a lot to him and his legacy here at the University of Georgia. But I think his strong comments that we saw after the Georgia Tech game and even over the course of this week sort of go to illustrate that, he's the old man raging against the dying of light, and that he wants to keep this game around because of what it pulls back to in college football, whereas the rest of the sport just seems to be moving forward, and it's becoming more like the NCAA tournament where, the thought there is you want to lose early. That way you have some time to reset, figure out who you are, then go into the NCAA tournament with a clean slate. Georgia won the SEC championship last year by beating Texas, and I'd make the argument that by playing that game and losing Carson Beck hurt their chances of winning a national championship a season ago. And, look, these two teams, Alabama and Georgia, enter the SEC championship game with a ton of injuries already. And if they pick up a few more, it's only going to further, I think, impact their chances of winning a national title this season.
Yeah, so here in just a moment, we're actually going to hear that quote that you were talking about from Kirby Smart that took place last Friday. But I do want to focus on the Alabama side of this. And as I said previously, it makes sense for conferences that only have one representative to bargain for the idea of no conference championships. But the SEC has been rather silent on this issue for the most part. And I think maybe Lane Kiffin said he didn't want Ole Miss to play in the conference championship last year. That's kind of the outlier in all of this. But for an Alabama team that has 2 losses headed into this game, they know that a loss potentially puts them out. And also Alabama is super banged up right now. We'll see that in an injury report later. If they win, we're not going to hear much from Alabama about this topic anymore. But if Alabama loses, you best believe that voices will be heard all across social media about abolishing conference championships, moving on. And that's just going to be the start of what I think is a domino effect in the SEC. If Alabama loses this game, it's going to be all out chaos from their fan base. And I think that's going to gain more traction to this idea that they should be taken away in the first place.
Yeah, if Alabama falls out, and it's not just going to be Kalen DeBoer and the Alabama machine making noise. It's going to be Greg Sankey in the SEC offices. I think Kirby Smart would say something about the impact of a team like that losing and falling out of the college football playoff, especially as you brought up earlier, Kaylee. let's say they fall out because of they lose bad enough to Georgia. Notre Dame and Miami stand to be the two teams that benefit the most from this. They're not playing this weekend. And so the fact that you have this obvious downside for Alabama this week, where yes, there is something to be gained. If they win, they clinch the conference championship bye into the college football playoff field, but they do not, in fact, get a first round bye. They would have to leap into the top 4 to do that. The downside here for Alabama in particular this week is pretty stark. Where last year, Georgia and Texas, I think, were both safely in the college football playoff field with how last year's setup was. Indiana and Ohio State, both those teams are going to be just fine. Texas Tech, they're going to be just fine. Whereas at BYU, they're glad they're playing in this game because it gives them a chance to get into the college football playoff. The same can be said for Virginia and Duke. Alabama's in a very unique situation this year where there's an obvious downside if they lose. And look, even though Georgia has not beaten Alabama historically, Georgia is favored to win this game. And I'll be very curious to see how it all plays out, where there will be a very tense sort of, I don't know, the game's probably going to end around 7:30. So a very tense 16 hours from when that game ends to when the college football playoff field is announced if Alabama were to lose, especially in the event that they lose, by 14 or something along the lines of that.
Yeah, so at least from the Georgia perspective, here's my take on this, and I kind of want to get yours too. I know that I have been more vocal about not wanting Georgia to play in the SEC championship game, but that doesn't mean I don't think that there should be one as a whole. And maybe I would feel differently if I covered a team in the ACC or the Big 12, but I think about players like Trevor Etienne from last year who spoke on how much winning that game meant to him, and hearing UGA fans and their roar all across Mercedes-Benz Stadium when Georgia won in overtime. I mean, for ESPN, we understand that these games are about the money, but for players and fans, it's all about the glory. And so it's hard for me to sit here and say that I want to see them go away.
Yeah, the 2024 team for Georgia in particular, I think, is the argument for keeping this game because I don't think anyone as the years passed was going to remember that team all that fondly. It was a very difficult season, especially just from being around it and covering it. It was not the joyous experience I think that we had seen in other years, and especially even in this year. But by going out and beating Texas in that memorable game, in that memorable fashion, you create a lifetime of memories for the players that were on that team. And, look, like Georgia's had better teams in 2024, but the fact that they're always going to be able to say they're SEC champions, I think carries a great deal of weight to them. And look, maybe the fact that the SEC championship game doesn't mean much to the rest of the conference is because Kirby Smart has, after this weekend, will have coached in 8 of them. The rest of the conference coaches combined will have coached in 2. And for me, in my perspective, look, maybe it's because I've just worked these 8 of the last 9 years now. I like being in this game. I like having the ability to go cover it. I like the fact that it's in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which for my money is one of the best stadiums in all of American sports. And so it feels like a big game. It feels like a big deal. I've covered other big games in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. There's a different level of roar that comes when it's the SEC championship game. And it's just been the site of so many iconic games over the years, whether it was in the Georgia Dome or in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. That sort of just giving that away just feels like another example of college football just cutting up its soul a little bit just to, make a few more bucks, have a few more college football playoff games.
Yeah, and for Georgia specifically, it's easy for your players and for the fan base to buy into the importance and the value of winning this game when your head coach is also buying into that as well. You brought it up earlier, but let's hear from Kirby Smart last week on playing in the SEC championship game.
If you worry about injury risk, we won't practice next week. So, you live your life scared of injuries, you know what you get? A very scared team. And there's also an opportunity to win an SEC championship. Does that matter? Does anybody care about that anymore? I grew up thinking that was the greatest game in the world. And I just differed from everybody else. Yeah, we lost guys today to injured. We're going to lose guys in practice to injury. But that's next man up. So what's wrong with this whole thing now? It's well, what if you get hurt? What if you do this? What if you do that? It's football. It's all part of it.
Yeah, and obviously he's coming at this from the injury perspective and not necessarily the part about being left out, but it's that part in the middle that he says along the lines of, does it matter to anyone now? Well, obviously to Kirby Smart it does, and now with Mark Stoops out, Kirby Smart is the dean of the SEC. So I imagine that moving forward, even as we get closer to SEC media days in the summer, he's going to be a lot more vocal about this because he knows that other people are about to start making their stances too, whether it's for or against the conference championship.
And I think he has to be. And I think, especially in the wake of Nick Saban retiring, I think Kirby Smart has at times been hesitant to really throw his weight around in terms of where he is, in terms of standing among not just the SEC coaches, but I think all of college football coaches. I think he, and I don't fault him for this, really wants to keep things focused on the players, on the games on the field, rather than sharing his opinions on the way things are going in college football. But it's pretty clear from getting to cover Kirby Smart in recent years, and specifically hearing him talk about the value of the SEC championship game, this means a great deal to him. And I think he's prepared to go to the mat, fighting to keep this game, fighting to have it around, because it is something to play for during the regular season. And I think, as he eloquates there, winning the SEC should matter a great deal. It harkens back to those great teams that you can remember from your own university's past. And winning the conference should carry a lot of weight. In a way, unfortunately, this is a byproduct of the college football playoff, and I think Kirby Smart understands the negative aspects of that. Getting to Atlanta, winning in Atlanta, it's something he's the only coach in this conference that knows how that feels, and that he feels so strongly about it, I think should say a great deal to the rest of the members of this league.
So last thing on this, you brought up the college football playoff and how that's kind of led to this entire conversation. I mean, is there a way that this can be fixed moving forward? I know they say if you put 16 teams in, then you don't really need them at all. But what if there's a way to have a 16-team playoff and all the people that participate in a conference championship from Power 4 schools, they automatically get a bid? So you've got 8 teams and another 8 at large. Could it be as simple as that? That way you still have the expanded playoff, but also are still valuing participation in a conference championship.
I think that's a quality solution, but I just think that we've seen a lot of pushback from automatic bids. And so getting into the college football playoff is something that they want to be earned on the field and not potentially have that. And to your point, Kaylee, you mentioned, okay, the Power 4 teams, if you get into your conference championship game, get 2 bids into the field. This year, that means Virginia and Duke would have already clinched bids into the college football playoff. And I think people would have hated that idea. So I think that there's probably some tweaking that needs to be done as far as getting teams into the college football playoff while still prioritizing the SEC championship game. I think the tiebreaker rules now are very convoluted because of how big these conferences have gotten. And I think there are people in ACC country that would have loved to have seen, say, in Miami and Virginia, their 2 highest ranked teams in the most recent college football playoff standings face off, rather than Duke and Virginia, because Duke wins some convoluted 8-team tiebreaker there.
Yeah, but also at the same time, if they're trying to move into this idea of a March Madness type bracket where you've got more teams and more Cinderellas, who's not to say that a runner-up from a conference championship can't be one of those Cinderellas? And I know that maybe we have this idea that if you don't win your conference, you're not going to win a national championship. But if that's the goal that you're trying to move towards, then, I mean, I guess putting runner-ups in there would make sense at the end of the day, even though I understand your point about the automatic bids. But if that's what they're trying to do, then they need to be consistent with what the NCAA tournament is doing.
Unfortunately, college football's lack of a central leader and leadership in general has led to us being at this point where a bunch of people have ideas, but there's no one central voice who is being like, okay, here's what we're going to do moving forward. It is effectively a bunch of fiefdoms where you have the Big Ten doing what they think is best, which is a 24-team playoff. You have the SEC, who is, I think, more than content to stay at 12 teams at this point in time. And you have people that would like to see them go to 16 teams. And the lack of leadership is why I think you could see these SEC championship type games go away. And for college football fans in general, I think that's a pretty significant loss.
All right, so we've got to move on because we got a lot more to come. But I will say, I do even feel fortunate that we get to sit here and talk about Georgia playing in an SEC championship. I hate that this conversation is happening. I understand, but I am more grateful than I thought I would be sitting here talking about Georgia getting into this game. And it's a chance for a huge accomplishment. So we're going to move on. We're going to talk Mike Bobo. We'll also talk about Quintavious Johnson as well as Gabe Harris. But first, we want to give a shout out to Zagoria Law Firm, because what makes them so unique is that they are the only law firm in the state that specializes in representing people who have been bitten by dogs as well as those who have been knocked down by dogs. They are also the official dog bite injury lawyers of the Georgia Bulldogs. So if you or a loved one has been hurt by someone else's dog, give them a call at 833-GA-DOG-BITE, that's DOGBITE, or visit ZagoriaLaw.com. And now with that, we'll do dog bites. So because it's an SEC game, they had to give us an injury report last night, and I was more surprised by the Alabama injuries than I was the Georgia injuries. Obviously, it's really sad to see Drew Bobo on that list. I think we kind of all expected that after seeing him on Friday, but wow. Alabama, LT Overton out. Also, hate to break it to you, your name twin, Kevin Riley, also out, Connor. And then Jam Miller is questionable. And then on the Georgia end, I think we get a little bit more confirmation on Drew Bobo. The rest of the guys we kind of expected. But, I mean, this is what people feared. You know, you kind of wanted this week to have the rest so you could get these guys healthy. And I think that Alabama is hurting more than Georgia at this point. So I'm curious to see how different this game will look with more key injuries than we saw the first time these two teams played.
Yeah, obviously the Drew Bobo injury is very significant in my mind. I believe it changes the ceiling of this team with how well he played and the drop-off there is from Drew Bobo to Malachi Tolliver. But I think this injury for Bobo lingers long past just the SEC championship game. The Alabama injuries, I think, at this point are a lot more concerning for this game in particular because, as we outlined, Alabama needs to win this game. LT Overton is a surprise out. I don't think anybody had seen that coming, and he spoke to the media on Tuesday, which is usually an indication that he's healthy and ready to go. Also, Kalen DeBoer had said on Sunday when we got a chance to talk to him, we're going to hear from him later on Thursday as well. He didn't quite know yet on Jam Miller, who's questionable this game with a lower leg injury. Josh Cevis, their tight end, is very important to that offense, missed the Auburn game. And DeBoer made it sound like he's going to miss this upcoming SEC championship game as well. So while the Bobo injury, I think, is very significant for Georgia moving forward, within the confines of this game, Alabama is much worse off, especially if Georgia ends up getting back Talon Taylor and Chauncey Bowens, who neither were listed on the availability report for Georgia this week.
Also, two things. Number one, is there a chance that we see anybody other than Malachi Tolliver at center on Saturday? And I don't really know the rules about this. I mean, once LT Overton is ruled out, I mean, does that is that permanent, or can he be taken off that as we get closer to Saturday?
My understanding is that once you're ruled out, you are done,
Okay.
and that is effectively why the doubtful tag sort of lives, because if they were trending that way, they would list him as doubtful. What was your first question there?
Any other chance we see a different center other than Malachi Tolliver?
I think in this game, because Georgia has the college football playoff and they know they're going to at least have some time between whether either be their first round game or if they're playing in the quarterfinals, I think they're going to ride with Malachi Tolliver in this game, see what he can do. He got the start against Charlotte. And then if they need to make adjustments moving forward and tinkers, they have an extended window to really iron it out in practice and get it ready for game shape. But I think against Alabama, Malachi Tolliver is the backup, battled injury early this season, missing time with an ankle injury. The fact that he jumped over Cortez Smith despite that injury, I think speaks to how confident Georgia feels and what he brings to this team.
So we've done a lot of Mike Bobo talk on this show.
Mike Bobo.
Maybe in a different way than I thought we would be talking about him this season. But now he is a Broyles Award semifinalist, one of 15. I mean, is there any way that he wins this award?
I don't think so this year, especially with how this Georgia offense played against Georgia Tech. But let's say they go turn around and go have a great game against Alabama this Saturday and they win because of their offense. I do think there's a world where he's a finalist. And I'd point out that if Mike Bobo gets to be a Broyles Award finalist this year, Mark, the second time in 3 years that he has done so as Georgia's offensive coordinator. Now, we don't need to talk about the 2024 team and everything that went wrong there. But I think given the circumstances this year, Bobo has done an excellent job of pushing the right buttons. And while, yes, the Georgia Tech game wasn't great, I put a lot more of that necessarily on Gunnar Stockton's shoulders than necessarily the guy calling the plays there. And I think losing Drew Bobo impacted how things went in the second half for Georgia in that game.
I will say one thing from the Georgia Tech game that I did think stood out was the performance of the outside linebackers, specifically Gabe Harris and Quintavious Johnson, who we talked a lot about in the preseason, but I feel like the productivity has been relatively quiet this season. Now, both of them had a tackle for a loss in that game. Also looked incredible on the opening drive. And I mean, this is the group where these two in particular, you want getting hot at the right time, especially playing Ty Simpson this weekend, because Georgia really didn't put any pressure on him the first time that they played. So if they can continue looking like this, then suddenly we're talking about the pass rush a little bit differently.
The biggest difference between Georgia's defense from the first Alabama game, yes, but really that second bye week to now, it's been the growth of the young cornerbacks, Ellis Robinson and DeMello Jones, and it is how Quintavious Johnson and Gabe Harris have become productive players, where they were doing nice things early in the season, but they weren't getting home, they weren't finishing, they weren't getting sacks, tackles for loss. They're starting to do that now. I think the game is slowing down for them, and they're going to need to go out there and put pressure on Ty Simpson, because as you just outlined, Kaylee, that didn't happen at all in that first game against Alabama back in September. And we saw last week against Auburn, especially even with Auburn falling down 17-0, I think you saw in that game that the key to rattling that Alabama offense is you got to trust your cornerbacks and secondary guys to hold up in man coverage on the outside, and you got to bring pressure. And if Georgia's able to do that and they're able to rattle Ty Simpson, Quintavious Johnson and Gabe Harris are going to be big reasons why. I thought Gabe Harris should have been credited for a safety on the first tech play of the game. I don't know why that wasn't ruled intentional grounding. They're able to get Simpson on the ground this time. I think that's going to go a long way in potentially giving Georgia a win.
Yeah, like you said, maybe it was a matter of them moving in silence for most of the season, which is fine. You're getting the job done, but now the stats are on paper, which is what you want to see out of this position. And speaking of moving in silence, we kind of have an idea of those that are locked into the playoffs that are outside of their conference championships. Now that we kind of have a better idea of what that will look like, do you have a playoff sleeper team? Maybe not necessarily like a national champion, but somebody that can make a really deep run.
I do, and it is the Oregon Ducks. It is an Oregon team that their resume is not very impressive in my mind. Like, that win over USC was huge, and I don't think that USC team is all that great. They have a lot of talent on this team, and unfortunately a lot of it has been lost to injury, but if they're able to get some time back, they're not playing the Big Ten championship game this week, there's potentially a path to them getting a bye, but I'd be skeptical of that happening. They need a lot to go their way. Texas Tech losing, Georgia losing in those circumstances there. There's a lot of talent there, and I think if they get the right seed, i.e. if you're that number 6 seed, I think that could do a lot for you in terms of making a deep run, because that's where Penn State was last year. And while I think all of us would say that Penn State team was fraudulent, especially as someone who on this panel picked them to win the national championship based on that run, that 6th seed I think could be very good, because you're either playing the ACC champ Virginia in the first round, or you're looking at the American champion, and then you're probably facing the loser of the Big Ten title game. I think Oregon is well positioned here.
Yeah, I've kind of said that I think the 6 is where you want to be if you're not going to get the bye, as opposed to the 5. For me, it kind of ties in with the last thing that we're going to talk about here in a second. I truly believe that in this world, there is no better motivator than anger. So I'm actually going to take Ole Miss for my pick, which I know that they're without Lane Kiffin now, but the Ole Miss offense has never really struggled. It's always been the defense. They just have to outscore everyone. But now you have a defensive-minded coach taking over your program. It's very clear that these players are now united. I don't want to say hatred. That feels strong. Their dislike and disapproval of how Lane went out. So I'm going to take Ole Miss as my sleeper pick to kind of make a deep run, just because they're really motivated right now, and they're probably more unified than ever with Lane Kiffin finally out the window. So speaking of that, let's talk about the coaching drama. Oh my gosh, Sunday. What a day for college football Twitter. That is why college football is the superior sport across all organizations, across all professional levels. Oh my gosh, yes it was. But now we've finally seen all of these, most of these teams. One of those teams we'll get to later, but most of them have their guy. It doesn't seem like Florida fans are too pleased with the Summerall hiring. I thought Galesh might go to Florida, but now, I mean, these things that we've been wondering all season long, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? We finally have some answers, and it went down in the most glorious way possible.
And not just on Sunday, rather, but the hiring for me of Brian Hartline to be USF's head coach on National Signing Day, I think is significant. You've seen Ohio State lose some players. Now, like, Ohio State's going to be fine long term, but that is a significant loss of one of the best assistant coaches in the country in terms of what he has brought to Ohio State there. I thought that was huge. Like the Lane Kiffin thing, I think people are just so done with it because it was so much more dragged out than it needed to be. Especially reading some of the reporting that has come out after the fact. He should have gone out there, beaten Mississippi State, and then just said, yes, I'm going to go be the head coach at LSU after that. And you would have saved Marty Smith a lot of time in the comfy Manning Center down there in Oxford.
Yeah, we're not going to poke too much fun at this situation right now, because we're going to do that in an extended version of Meme Machine. But before we do that, really quick, want to give a shout out to Retro Roofers, the easy choice in Atlanta and surrounding areas for all of your roofing needs. They are part of the GAF President's Club, which only 19 out of 3,000 companies earn this every single year. They're also GAF Fortified Certified, which only a few companies on top of that have. They also use architectural shingles that include a Golden Pledge warranty on every job for free. Also, every project that they take on has a supervisor on site, which most other companies don't provide. They also work with 25 plus insurance companies, which gives a 5-year workmanship warranty on all of their installs. And you can even ask for the list of insurances that they work with. So make sure to visit retroroofers.com and check out their videos to see how a roof should be installed. So this week, there's just so many good things on the internet. So we couldn't just pick one. We had to pick a few. This is Mean Machine.
Who's that going down the track? Who's that coming down the track? It's the Mean Machine and Randy Black. It's the Mean Machine and Randy Black. Go,
I'm hearing about Lane Kiffin. Is he out at Ole Miss?
Cody, I'm glad you're sitting down.
Yes. Really quick before we get started, I do want to give a huge shout out to Cody for his hard work yesterday on National Signing Day, making a trip to the western part of the state to go see Bowden and Carrollton and those signees. Also, he made an incredible video. It was like a one shining moment with all of the signees that you can check out on our DawgNation YouTube page. It was perfect. So I just have to give you your flowers because you did such a great job yesterday.
I wasn't at Paulding County at 8 a.m. and then on the air at 8 p.m. like you guys were yesterday. So it was a fun day all around.
All right, let's get it going. So I submitted a few. Everybody else did too. I'm going to go first. I don't know which one Cody's going to show first, so it's going to be about the element of surprise. Perfect. You mentioned Marty Smith, who, oh my gosh, the job is never done. So it's a picture of Marty Smith in the car, typically where a dog would be, and it says the AC is on, he has water, and he's listening to his favorite music. I'm so glad that Lane Kiffin did give him that one final interview, but that was just another kind of storyline that was taking place on Sunday that the world was keeping up with. So good job to Marty Smith, really making reporters and the media look good out there.
I'm going to zag here. I think Marty Smith is like people that were, saying, oh, Marty Smith's being held hostage and things like that. He was in an air-conditioned room. He was standing in the facility. Like most of the other reporters that don't pay Ole Miss broadcasting rights weren't given the same luxuries that Mr. Marty Smith was. The Marty Smith thing, it's a little bit tired for me.
No, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much. Seeing the updates, what was going on. I mean, I would have hated to have been there all day with literally zero answers. I think I would have just gotten angry, but a professional handles that kind of stuff well. So, Cody, what you got?
All right, we'll stick in that same vein here. I'll move this one up. Lane Kiffin now completed the college football coaching rainbow. You can see all the different colors. Now, I did not know, maybe I just wasn't aware of the Colorado State. Is that what that is up there in the middle? He is now coached in all these colors, much bigger at FAU than he is now. So that was fun to see. It reminds me, I guess they did that with Shaq at the end of his career because he was in all the different colors. But yeah, all the different colors of Lane Kiffin.
He had to be like a child at Colorado State. He looks like a baby there.
He looks like Daniel Tosh.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. And I missed that show just for ripping Lane Kiffin as well.
Yep.
Connor?
All right, let's see. I got a lot here, so I don't know which one is.
This is one that came up first.
Here we go. Yeah, so Marty Smith there, still being hostage there. Friend Ben Portnoy, Panda Watch, Day 5. This is an Anchorman reference. It just sort of felt like this Lane Kiffin thing was so dragged out, and I wish that at some point Marty Smith had just turned around and yelled to no one in particular, "Come out, you stupid jerk. You're making me look bad."
No, Marty, I will say, I know we have mixed feelings about it, but the Marty Smith subplot was just like an extra added thing to like keep the day going a little bit. So I'm glad that we included him in there. I've got another one. Oh, yeah. This one came out this morning, so it wasn't necessarily from Sunday. Penn State just really, really taking their time. It says maybe Penn State should think about a gap year in 2026. Go explore Europe. Check out every MLB ballpark. Just something to look into. I mean, they thought this was a desirable job, and I don't know. Maybe they have too many candidates to choose from, or maybe there's no one left, which is honestly the possibility that stands out. But poor Penn State getting left out once again.
It's so weird that they were the first big school to fall. Obviously, Virginia Tech and UCLA move on. And like a lot of people thought it was time to move on from James Franklin. And yet they can't really find anyone that would go and fit and take that job. They made a run at BYU's coach, but I guess the crumble cookie money came through and that ended up falling through. So Penn State in a very tough situation right now.
I wonder, do you just, if you're Penn State at this point, do you have to go with somebody of the NFL and just say, yeah, we were just waiting on the NFL? You got to like overpay a coordinator in the NFL to try and come down and say, this was the plan all along. Try and sell it that way.
Or if you could just go NFL, do a 1-year contract while you're looking for somebody else.
I kind of like the gap year of, we're going to have like a 1-year coach and then we're going to find somebody else.
Backpack around Europe.
Jimbo Fisher to Penn State for 1 year?
Yep.
All right. Cody.
All right, we'll go this one next. Since neither one's making the college football playoff, can we at least let the nerds rematch? Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt look like they're going to be on the outside looking in with their quarterbacks. And anytime we can just call them the nerds a week after we beat Georgia Tech, we're going to put that on the show.
Does anybody know what the combined age of Haynes King and Diego Pavia is?
It might be 50. It's close.
They might have to rename it to like the Super Senior Bowl.
Get some pharmacy ads.
The Senior Citizen Bowl.
The Divorced Dads Bowl.
Yes, love that because I mean they're both the hair. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I could be about that. Not Vanderbilt making the playoff or putting in an executive order for 16 teams, but a rematch of the Nerd Bowl. I could get behind that.
Yeah.
There you go. Sell it that way. All right, Connor. Here's what I got next for you.
Next for me. Okay. This is from Kevin Clark, ESPN writer. This is from the movie Dunkirk, where, they sort of see that the reinforcements are coming in and they're going to be able to get off the beach there in France. This is in regard to what now looks like the college football committee slowly but surely showing us that head-to-head is actually going to matter. With BYU sandwiched in between Notre Dame and Miami, should BYU lose this week and fall behind Miami, I would be floored if that is the case, where they have Notre Dame at 10 and Miami at 11, and they elect to leave it that way. I think in the world where they are right next to each other in the college football playoff rankings, they will ultimately do what is right and reward the head-to-head victory, even if I think we all agree here that Notre Dame is the better team than Miami.
I mean, literally the only person that wants to see this happen are Miami fans in the ACC office. I mean, seriously, come on.
Is there a way the college football playoff committee's been playing the long game and this was the plan? Are they just falling into this?
I think they've sort of realized, hey, this is a plan that can work along the way for us.
I have one more, and I think I can say this word on air. I don't think it counts as a
Don't get fired.
I'm not going to get fired. Can I get confirmation
and I'm not
in my
playing
ear?
the audio, just Kaylee, just so you know, I don't want to get dinged on YouTube.
Yeah. No,
so you're going to have to do a dramatic reading here.
That I'm allowed to say that?
You can say that, yeah.
I figured I could. Okay, this comes from Brandon Walker. Ole Miss right now, The Office, my absolute favorite show of all time. A great Michael Scott quote. I'll wait till it gets back to the beginning so I can read it for you.
You can say ho.
Yeah, okay. The fact that you said it first makes me feel a little bit better. I'm going to let it start over and then I'll go. It goes, because your bros are always there for you. They have got your back after your hoe rips your heart out for no good reason. And you were nothing but great to your hoe. And you told her that she was the only hoe for you and that she was better than all the other hoes in the world. And then suddenly she's not your hoe no more. First off, an iconic Office tweet. Also, too, like, I couldn't get enough of Hogate on Saturday. I just kind of was like trying to picture, what if Connor said that about Kirby Smart? Like, what if that was Connor? Like, would Kirby have reacted in the same way? And it's so funny because
Kirby would have reacted. He reacts anyway.
I don't think that he would
I'd be
have.
in some black box site in the Middle East right now if I had said that about Kirby Smart.
But it was also just so funny to watch the underdog comeback story happen in real time, where like people were villainizing this guy for saying that on a podcast, and then over the span of 24 hours, everybody's like, you know what?
He's right.
Maybe he was right. And like, I was kind of for it from the beginning. But wow, what a comeback story for, I think it's Spirit Ben, who, now you got to copyright and do all that kind of stuff with all the shirts and the hats and everything that are about to be made. So I wanted to make sure that I got to poke fun of that.
That's good stuff. All right. Mine we're doing, best things you see on the internet. This was a really fun one. This one does have a little bit of audio, so we'll play it for you.
Having a D1 athlete as a best friend.
Now get that cut, get vertical. You gotta break that tackle. You got to L cut, get vertical, iron cross the ball, put your shoulders down, and run.
So it's Nate Frazier, obviously watching Vandy in Tennessee, which is funny because after the Georgia Tech game, he said, yeah, I'm going to recover and watch some football. He's not recovering. He is the most active football participant you could see. But I love the way he goes through it. And we have talked about on Boots on the Ground with Mike Griffith about how he's now covering the ball 2 hands. And it seemed like that happened during the year, and he's talking about it, and it just goes shoulder first into whoever's filming him on the couch.
So I'm gonna have to get permission on this, and maybe we'll show it on next week's show. But I do have a friend who works for another network. She goes by the name of Georgia Chambers, and she did a one-on-one interview with Nate Frazier and Dalen Everett, and somebody had managed to tell them that she was the intro outro for a Rich Homie Quan song. I wish that y'all could have seen Nate Frazier's reaction to this. It is everything that you think it would be and more, because you can tell he's got the dramatics, he's got charisma. It made me see him in a different light, so maybe I can get that video for next week, because it really shows him and Dalen's personality.
I'll be interested to see this week against Alabama if Nate Frazier takes some of his own advice and breaks those tackles at the second level. That way we can see some long runs from Mr. Frazier.
All right, Connor, bring us home.
Yeah, similar to Cody's Lane Kiffin completes the rainbow. He's effectively just done what Ed Orgeron has done, following in his footsteps. Obviously, Ed Orgeron, the head coach at Ole Miss. Orgeron replaced Kiffin after he got tarmacked at USC. And then obviously Orgeron wins a national championship there at LSU. Just very funny. Kiffin and Orgeron are close. They obviously work together at Tennessee. I'll be very interested to see if Orgeron ends up coming back. There has been talks that he is welcomed there in LSU. Obviously an all-time college football character and someone who I think would help LSU and Lane Kiffin greatly.
And didn't he mention him in his opening press conference too?
I believe he did.
That
yes.
feels intentional, you know?
Yep.
I think, Connor, you submitted one more than we did, so if you've got one more, please share it with the class.
I did. This is from a long time ago. Kayla, he was the head coach of the Oakland Raiders and got fired. And Al Davis, the iconic Raiders owner, in his press conference, wheeled out an overhead projector to use for props and things like that. Al Davis, who at the time was sort of like vilified for firing Kiffin after just 1 year, after all the shenanigans we've seen with Kiffin over the many lives of his career, as Bomani Jones here notes, vindicated with his decision to move on from Lane Kiffin. Even very little has gone right for the Raiders. They knew what Lane Kiffin was very early on there out in Oakland at the time.
I can tell that picture is old, not because of the overhead projector, but because of the Gatorade cup that they're using. Like, you see that in, like, all the 2000s movies. Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
I know that waxy
I was
little
like,
that in
this is like
movies
probably
before.
2007, 2008, which that is considered like a long time ago now, is just debilitating.
We're pushing on 20 years.
Would not have picked that out. That is a good call, Kayla.
It also feels like maybe it's been 20 years since any of us have gotten a touchdown prediction right. So we're going to do that in a minute. But really quick, want to remind you guys that on Saturday, of course, we'll have DawgNation Game Day. It'll be myself and Jeff Sintel starting at 2 o'clock live from the field at Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the second week in a row. We'll also feature guests like Cody Chaffins and Connor Riley and just talk about what needs to go differently for Georgia in the rematch, and also why this is a different Georgia team than the one that faced Alabama the first time. So make sure to join us Saturday at 2, and if you need a reminder, then just subscribe to our DawgNation YouTube page. Hit that bell so you get notified right when we go live. I promise it's going to be an incredible show, and we're excited to capture so many cool things on the field like we got to do last week. All right, touchdown predictions. Hasn't changed. Still the same. And so I believe it's Cody's got 5, Connor's behind with 4, and I have 3. But you know what? There's still time left. But I do believe that Connor has the first pick this week. Connor, what are you going to do with your prediction?
I am going to go this week with Gunnar Stockton rushing touchdown. I've only used this once this year. I think he uses his legs. He only ran the ball 5 times in that first game against Alabama. I think you're going to see him do that a little bit more this time around. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the Gunnar Stockton rushing touchdown this week. All
right, Cody?
I don't know if am I out of Nate Frazier's. Can I get a Nate Frazier?
I think you've got a Nate Frazier.
I'll give you a Nate Frazier.
I'll take a Nate
it.
Frazier then. If I'm not out of him, I will use a Nate Frazier this week.
Only because that's not the person I was going to pick. If it would have been the other way around, maybe. I am going to piggyback off of something that Craig Dandridge said last night on the Before the Hedges broadcast. Noah Thomas receiving touchdown. This will be my second time taking Noah Thomas. Just kind of feels like that moment is waiting to happen. I'm not submitting this as my pick, but I would love to see a world where Talon Taylor catches the winning touchdown against Alabama to have a full circle moment, but I'm not willing to put a prediction in for that. I just maybe am throwing that into the air. So I'm going to take a Noah Thomas touchdown for my second one of the year.
What if you say Talon Taylor, what if we let Talon Taylor count as 2?
Oh.
Ooh, spicing it up.
No.
No,
I'm not taking it. I can't afford it.
We would love the redemption. We're not sure we trust it.
Yeah, no. I can't go there. I'm going to stick with my gut. All right, so we'll say goodbye to Cody Chaffins. Also, speaking of our Craig Dandridge interview, we had a bunch of content go out for National Signing Day yesterday, interviews with a lot of the signees. So you can also check that out on our DawgNation YouTube page. Connor, do you have any final thoughts on maybe something that we talked about today or maybe something that we didn't talk about today?
I'm surprised, and maybe it's just the timing this week with so much going on. No Jared Curtis talk this week. I felt like there could have been some very good memes on that there. But yeah, I mean, between the Jared Curtis stuff and the Lane Kiffin stuff, college football has just got to make things happen sooner. If you know you're leaving, don't drag it out. Just get it over and done with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that most of the tweets I liked regarding that probably can't be shown on this show, so better safe than sorry. But I think, like most Georgia fans, I'm just kind of ready to move on from that conversation and celebrate the guys who did choose to stay, and Georgia can figure out what it needs to moving forward. But for now, got to focus on the task at hand, which is the SEC Championship. So we'll see you guys Saturday at 2 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining us, and with that, we'll see you right back here next Thursday on DawgNation at Large.